Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to another episode here on Gladiator Disc Golf. Today I have a follow-up video from my backhand throwing form video that I put out about a month ago. So today we're going to be talking about the finer details of the backhand throw. Some of the things that I may have touched on in my previous video, but couldn't really delve too deeply into it. So we're going to talk about some of those things today, so view this as kind of a part 2 to that backhand video. If you're brand new to the channel, I want to thank you so much for coming and stopping by. Please make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can find out the next time a video comes up. So there are 5 things I want to talk to you guys about today regarding the finer details of the backhand throw. The first is how to engage those hips. The second thing is sort of how you throw off the tee pad with your going toe to heel for some throws or just being perpendicular. The third thing is this concept and this idea of watching your disc as it comes across your chest. The fourth thing is all about the hand. How do you get that snap? How do you release the disc? Do you open your hand? How tight do you grip it? All those things. And the final and fifth thing that I want to talk about is body alignment. And I'll get into more detail about that here in a little bit. Down below in the description, I've included timestamps for each of these things. So if there's a specific skill that you're looking for, you can fast forward to that time so that you can hear that. Or if you need to work on all of this stuff, go ahead and watch the entire video. So when it comes to engaging the hips, all right, I talked about in the first video how the hips generate all that power into your throw, and I got some people who liked that but didn't really understand exactly what it means to engage those hips. It's a very simple twitch movement. When you have this twitch movement, when your disc is out here, engaging those hips is before you even pull through. Okay, if you notice, the moment I twitch my hips, my elbow starts to bend. Now, I'm not doing this on purpose. This is my natural body movement. And so as I'm twitching those hips, you see I'm now coming into this power pocket, which is where you want the disc to be. So twitching, and as soon as you twitch, you're obviously going to power the disc through with your arm as well, but it all is initiated with that. So one thing that I have found that is helpful to me is to pay attention to my plant foot. If my foot stays really pretty much in its spot where it was when I planted it, from my experience in engaging my hips in my throw, I can pretty much ascertain that I have not engaged my hips. When my foot stays like this, all I pretty much did was basically plant it on the concrete and say, don't move whatsoever, and my body rotated around my leg. So one thing that I do to make sure I've engaged my hips is when I'm throwing, I want to actively think about also rotating my foot. And by rotating your foot, you're going to know whether or not those hips were engaged. Your hips can't rotate if your foot doesn't rotate. And I'm trying to rotate my hips, I'm stuck. I can't go any further without hurting myself and dislocating my hip. But as I come through, if I'm rotating on my foot, now my hips are able to point to my target for my follow through. So it's super important that you make sure that as you're coming through, that you're getting those hips and that rotation of the foot involved. This leads into point number 2, the toe to the heel. I know in that video I talked about making sure you were looking back, and one way to emphasize that was to, as you are coming across after your X-step, to have your toe and basically your back to the tee pad. For a lot of shots, this is not necessary because you're not going to need to generate that much, the power that comes from that kind of throw. But really what it's great for is a tool to help you get used to looking at your reach back and then coming through. What's most important about this is that you do not point your foot out forward on the tee pad, because that means your hips are already open, at least perpendicular to the tee pad so that you can get that rotation and spin on your foot. The third thing that I wanted to talk about was watching the disc. The issue that a lot of people have is they watch, and they do this big spin with their arm. It never snaps through, and they're looking at their target the entire time. Now, if you're doing a little upshot, all right, that's fine. But if you're trying to drive 300 feet, okay, you can't be looking at your target the entire time. You have to come and look and reach back and then follow through. So when I talk about watching the disc, I emphasized that point, and I'm going to emphasize it again because you have to train yourself to not stare at your target on a drive, all right? And so what you're wanting to do is to allow yourself to trust your body to know where it's throwing, even when you're not actively looking at that target the entire time. So if I'm throwing at my camera, when I'm coming through, I'm watching, and then as I plant my foot and I reach back, all right, I'm gonna take a split second away from looking at my target to get that full extension and come through and follow through with everything that we've discussed thus far. But by allowing yourself that more smooth follow through, you're not rounding your shoulders on your throw, which means that it's gonna be healthier for your shoulder and your elbow, okay? So what you wanna make sure that you're doing is that you're watching it as it's coming through, okay? And just give yourself that split second. This is why the towel is so great, because you don't have to go retrieve it. You can just hold it and you can hear it. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is something that I didn't really address too much in my first video, and that is sort of getting that spin and disc release, all right? If you watch all the best pros, and even the guys at your local club or in your family or whoever you play with, when they're driving, you don't see them open up their hand. What you want to do is sort of hold the disc as if you're giving a nice handshake. That way you're able to generate that spin on the disc, and that spin and that snap and that follow through, the disc is going to propel out of your hand. So to become consistent in throwing the disc and having it release straight, you need to make sure that you're not rounding. You need to make sure that you're not dipping on your throws or sort of just aiming at the ground, because then you're never gonna get to see a flight. You wanna make sure that you're following through and that you're keeping that disc on a linear plane as it's coming through. And that's going to help. And then when you know that you can consistently do that, that is going to help you tremendously in being able to diagnose why you're missing left or why you're missing right. So those four things are pretty important that we've talked about. The fifth thing, body alignment, has really revolutionized my game. When I was on the tee pad, I'd almost have a little dip in my left shoulder, which is my non-throwing arm. So my right shoulder was elevated. And so the mentality behind this was that I would come through, and then as I came down, I would level my shoulders and follow through. I've been doing that for 2.5 years, and that hasn't happened yet. I haven't consistently brought it down. My body was out of alignment. I was standing like this, and guess what? Everything's gonna start coming up. That nose angle is naturally gonna come up. And so in order to throw flat shots, we want to correct this. And it's going to almost feel like you're falling over a little bit. That's sort of the feeling that I've had. But when I'm on the tee pad, I make sure beforehand that I'm not leaning just on one foot. I make sure I have equal weight on 2 feet. And as I'm coming through, I want to make sure that my shoulders are over my hips and that my hips stay over my knees as much as possible. And what you're going to have there is your body's going to be perfectly in sync and in line the entire time you're throwing. And when your body is in sync, when your body is lined up perfectly, like in any sport, that's when you're going to generate the most power, and therefore you're going to have the most accuracy as well, and therefore the most success. So these are some pretty fine details to the backhand throw. and it's going to take some time to work on it. I'm talking to you guys about it, but it's things that I'm still working on and improving, and I'm telling you from personal experience, as I work on implementing all of these things into my backhand drive, into my backhand throw, I'm becoming so much more consistent. And as my form is getting better and I'm becoming more consistent, I'm beginning to see distance. That was a ton of information, but I appreciate you watching it so much. These are the 5 things that I wanted to address as the finer details of the backhand throw, talking about all different parts of the body. And that's all I have for you today, guys. Have a good round.